Hey, my name's Bruce Snell. I'm with BSG International, and we're here today to go over our Applied Business Science classes. And the class today that we're going to be focusing on is class number 23, which basically it deals with delegating responsibility that provides accountability. If you look at this last section, number 6, what we have done through this whole series is kind of we've been really focusing a lot on process, step, procedure, and understanding organizational structure and understanding what are these 4 barriers as they're interacting internally within the organization. Kind of where we're getting to now is that we want to start looking at some of these base skills and kind of getting down to the point of some interaction or some self-awareness. We're going to kind of, again, profile some of the things that we're saying what we need in order to succeed in business and in our base work centers, our day-to-day activity. If you'll open up your class, there's a couple of things that we're looking at, and one is that the responsibility of convenience. We had talked about that before, and the responsibility of convenience. We're saying that usually you're responsible when it's a problem. What we're looking at here is trying to figure out how in the world that we can delegate this stuff down, and we've been talking now for 5 parts up till this about building that infrastructure to where we can delegate down. And we've also been talking about some of the issues, whether it's interpersonal and the 1% that are affecting 5 that are affecting 20. What you're looking at now is that now we kind of want to start moving away from the process side of it and start looking at the personal side of it to kind of bring this thing together. So what we're looking at is that, yes, these classes are good individually, but we also want you to keep thinking everything that we're doing, we're moving you a little step further to building this business infrastructure of this applied business science. So we're saying here the responsibility, 99% of our folks want to be accountable, want to be responsible. And we go through and we hear a lot of things about we don't have, people don't want to be accountable, they don't want to do this. Our people do. We're going to go and look at the 4 barriers to quality on how that, and that's the reason it doesn't happen. If you look at page 1, we're going to look at responsibility, accountability, and we put down some little deal points that we want to talk about that we all need to focus on individually. Now see, when we're covering this stuff and talking about it, what we don't want you to do is to get through the class and then throw the book on the counter and not do anything else with it. The purpose of making these workshops and these classes to where individually you can use and retrain these things. Right now we're trying to put some things together that we have found successful over the last decade here to help us, if nothing else, form some affirmations about some things that we can do to improve ourselves that'll in turn improve our work environment. That'll in turn help us out at home. If you look at the responsibility, we're talking about the base values. If you look at the base values, we've talked about this, and in our handout and our advertisement and everything else we've ever done, we continually focus on what we're saying our base values and our 2 rules. So no matter what we're talking about or doing here, we have to keep in mind the base values as well as the 4 barriers to quality. Because remember, those things are interacting with us daily here. So we basically put down responsibility, and we want to look at one of the first things is respect. Now we're talking about individually, is that not only do we have to respect others, we have to respect ourselves, and we have to build that self-worth. So if we're respecting others, we're going to get people on our game, or basically on our side, on our team, and people will want to be and belong to whatever we happen to be doing at that time. Because if we're respecting other people, we're going to get that impact and that interaction, and if we're respecting, we're going to be trusting. So let's look at the ethics. Next is the ethics. We're saying here that no matter what's happening internally, they're saying it's something like 85% of the workforce at a recent poll that we saw, that they will either get the product out against quality or quality standards because they were fearful that they would get retaliated against. What we're saying here is the ethics. We have to retain our integrity as we're moving through the organization and the interactions. We're saying here it's really kind of tough sometimes, especially when you got a large organization and it's informal, because it seems like no matter what you're doing, you're getting the heck beat out of you. What we're saying is that there's some ways to handle all these issues, and this is what we're talking about in these last 4 or 5 workshops of interacting. So what we're saying here, not only ourselves, but how in the world can we treat somebody else with respect and dignity when we don't respect ourselves, or we don't have self-confidence or self-worth, because that's projected and it masks a ton of other things. So we really want you to look at why things are happening to you in your life. And we're saying service. We're basically looking at servicing, helping other people. Because if you're giving, you're going to receive back. And this is where we're saying, and we talked quite a bit at the last class about being the bigger person. Not necessarily you're going to get that win today, but remember, each time we kind of suck it up and be the bigger person, we get another block thrown in our foundation of integrity. So don't look at whatever's happening internally in the organization as a win-lose, that person was able to get over on you. Look at it that you retain your integrity, and remember that 1%, it's inevitable. They're going to get what's due to them, whether it's here or there or whatever. Let's not worry about what they're getting out of it. Next is positive. Now, I get some real strong feedback sometimes on this positive stuff. I told you we were at one of our plants and somebody goes, Bruce, I just can't be positive. I'm not like you. I can't get up every day and say smile in the AM or happy in the AM. I can't. And what we're saying here, it's literally that easy that we can make that conscious decision. But what we have to do is that we have to continually refocus on moving from the negative and stacking those things there to a positive attitude. And once we get a negative imprint in our head, we need to immediately replace it with a positive. Because if you look at what happens is this negative stuff starts building up inside of you, whether you realize it or not. Not only does it now start affecting you, but it starts affecting everybody else around you. And remember, it's just as easy to be positive as it is negative. A lot of the negative characteristics that we have are from our environment. Is that if you look at a lot of the stuff out there, it's negative. So what we're saying is be conscious of the negative stuff that's happening. If we're taking in some negative stuff, we want to replace it with a positive. Next is optimism. Now remember, we've already had some workshops on, we're talking about moderation and balance. I'm not saying being so optimistic that you're like a fool going down the street. We're saying here is you can be and look at things as though they're going to happen, and they're going to happen in a positive manner. Have you ever noticed that you're hoping something doesn't happen to you and it always seems to happen to you? I really believe that we're putting this energy out there, and what we're doing is that we're getting basically what we're in effect focusing on, which happens to be negative. So we're wanting to be very cautious here of looking at getting those negative thoughts, discounting those negative impressions, and moving in with positive. And as soon as you find yourself thinking about a negative, we want you to discount it, move on, and throw something in there positive. And for the optimism, man, there's nothing better. Just think about that, just that word, is that we could either be happy looking forward to the next day and that current day, or we can be dreading not only getting up in the morning, but the next day. And I've seen these folks in these companies retiring after 30-something years, and they're just as angry, just as frustrated, just as unhappy, and nothing has gone wrong or right in their life for 30-something years at the company. And then they're blaming the company and everybody else around them. And it's amazing, once they retire, you know where we find them? We can't run them out of the place, because what we've realized is that a lot of those folks don't have nothing else. They've got this negativism built up to where they have nobody. Most of them at certain points have been married once or twice, and then they look around, they don't have any friends. The only folks they know are the ones they're having or meet at work, and the ones they're having at work, they're just putting up with them because they're just so negative. Now let's look at the nature. We're saying have a good, positive nature to where when you go in, it's amazing. If you look at going to, let's say, a party or something, who do people hang around? Do they hang around that depressed looking guy? Or do they hang around somebody that's kind of having fun? So if you look at this, the nature, it's as easy to be good nature than a bad disposition. So we're looking at being good-natured and feeling and thinking good-natured. Tell me that that doesn't affect what's happening in the organization with the 4 barriers to quality between co-workers and management and the whole bit. So look at the smile. We're saying the smile in the AM. Smile in the morning improves life every day. And again, we're saying that's a universal. I don't know, universal signal, I guess, is that no matter where you go, if you're pulling up in the Congo in a boat and got some guys sitting there racking coconuts together, can't speak any English, what they can do, I'm not saying I can speak English, but if you look at it, those folks there will immediately, if you smile and give that body language to support that smile, they're going to smile back. And it's a universal language, and I'm not sure where or how that thing came about, but remember that, because if you're smiling, it's hard to defeat that smile internally. And let's look at integrity, and we talked about this. We're getting daily examples of everything but integrity. We're saying here that let's retain our integrity, and if we're retaining our integrity along with all this other stuff, it's like we're going to be responsible because it's going to seek us out, and people are going to seek us out. And believe. You know, there's the doubting Thomas stuff, and we've heard all these things about every reason in the world why it ain't going to make or why it ain't going to do. And what we're saying here, and I think I'm kind of a good example of that, we've been told every reason in the world why what we're doing, we shouldn't be able to do it. But we have a belief and a goal and a focus of what we are doing. And when you believe in something, it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And we're saying it's just as easy to believe as it is to disbelieve. And it's a lot funner. Let's look at now leadership. Again, leadership, we're talking leadership, I don't care if you're management, non-management, or whatever, is that we're looking at leadership, setting an example for people to follow. If we're looking at the leadership, we need to internally take that in and project that good person, that good citizen. Empathy. We're looking at here, it's really interesting. We have a tendency to forget that all of us have kind of went through a little tough times here and there. We need to be compassionate for the folks in the workplace that are also going through some issues, and we got to be the first ones to help out and step up and show concern. Now, what we're talking about here, we're not looking at the 1% that's always got a problem, and we all know who those folks are. We're not saying waste the time on them. What we are saying is that have that empathy for folks around you and in your base work centers and in your departments. Because again, put yourself in their shoes. You never know what someone is going through, and we immediately form an opinion that that person's not a good person, they don't deserve help, they're this, or whatever. And we're saying here is that the empathy is very important. And that's how most of us have built ourselves up over all these years, is because we keep putting ourselves in the customer's shoes. And we also, some of the most successful managers I've seen, is that they can't do enough to help their employees. Example, Bob Yeoman. He is a friend of many years, runs several different hotels, and his people, he cannot do enough for his people. You go into any of his hotels, is that they're always smiling, they're always up, they're always positive. And when I say, yeah, I know Bob Yeoman, there's a light that turns on inside of them. And all Bob does is focus on his people and focus on the customers. He doesn't do anything else. He sits there and focuses and helps his people. If they've got a problem or an issue, he's there to help out. And that's what we've got to do. And that's how we get responsibility. That's how we get accountability. That's how we get participation, by basically bringing people along with us, not going to a seminar and saying, hey, you got to be accountable. We're saying here by our actions and interactions with our co-workers. Now let's look at the introduction to problems there on page number 2. The interesting thing, and we've talked about this, is that we've got to change the perception of the problems in the workplace. And we're saying here is that it's not necessarily that we have a tendency to look at problems and say that person is the blame. We have to change that and say that 99% of our folks are good people. They want to do what's right, and that it's basically the 4 barriers to quality that are preventing that. So not look at it as our people are the problem, but it's the 4 barriers to quality. Okay, now encourage, don't shoot the messenger delivering the problem. Now, we're just assuming some of us have problems. So the folks that don't have any problems, this will be something good for you whenever you do have some problems and stuff. If you look at encourage, don't shoot the messenger delivering the problem. We all and have all asked that, hey, if we got an issue, got a problem, bring it to me and let's fix it. And then what do? We come with a problem, we come with an issue, and then all of a sudden we're beating the tar out of the people. We're saying here, encourage to bring it, but we also have to simmer down when they're bringing us a particular issue or a problem. And that is that, okay, let's look at the problem, but remember, we have a tendency immediately, if it's a problem, to almost get angry at the person bringing you the problem. See, and this is the thing that's kind of happening here. We're going, hey, you told me to bring you a problem, now you're whipping the tar out of me. What do you mean? What do you want me to do? So you know what's going to happen. People are going to stop bringing problems. And then what you're going to say, as we develop the program and develop the infrastructure, people will be solving their own problems. But they still need to address issues. And if you look at that, a lot of the things that we start shutting down is that the way that we react when someone brings us a particular deal. And the 4 barriers to quality awareness of what we're talking about is to make sure when somebody brings that problem, or if you're that person facing a particular deal or problem, we want you to look at, we call it kind of like the 4 barriers to quality appraisal. And that is it because of fear? Is that a problem because there's fear in my department, in that base work center, in that particular process, or with the co-workers? Then we're going to say, okay, is it lack of communication? Is the communication verbal or is it written? Then we're going to look at, is it because of lack of written procedure? Or we're saying, is the procedure written? Is it procedure written by the people that's doing it? Remember, we said we have those generic policies and procedures that are out there that are written by someone off-site that we kind of take and put on the thing, and we call that a procedure. We want to ask, is the procedure correct? Again, we're looking at, let's go then next to the lack of training. Okay, is that problem because, number one, the person didn't have training, or they didn't have the training on like the personal issues? Did they have the training of the particular process issues? Then what that's going to do, by going through this appraisal, what's it going to do is that basically by identifying and talking about that, you're going to identify the problem and you're going to identify the solution of what we've got to do. And we've got to get out of that habit of that's a particular problem, and then what are we going to do? That particular problem, what we do, we go fix it, we go basically go put out another fire, and we never look at the process. Now think about that. We're continually putting out fires and we never look at the process. So here we want to look at the 4 barriers to quality awareness. Now we've been given everything from action items, task team forms, problem solving forms. We've been looking at everything from audits, from the 4 barriers to quality, and now we got process, step, and procedure forms that are all coordinated and talking to one another. And what we're trying to do here is bring it together that it's really process, step, and procedure, the 4 barriers, the people, and what we've done is pull it apart to where you can identify how you can use it throughout the day, throughout the organization in a lot of different settings. But this is as the awareness grows. And of course our base values, promoting goodness in the workplace, the quality of life. We're saying here, let's do what's morally and ethically correct and treat everybody as you want to be treated. And when all else fails, remember that 99% of our people are good people and they really want to do the good job and do the right thing. It's the 4 barriers. So we have to really step back and get ourselves under control, that when we're addressing these issues, not attacking our people, but focusing on the 4 barriers to quality and focusing on the issue and the process and not our people, because that's where we run into problems of when we start trying to either blame or we're wanting to find, I love that thing, who's responsible for that. Now by blaming somebody or asking who's responsible, has that solved anything? No, it hasn't. We're saying we immediately have to go from the people to the process. That's the first thing we need to do. Immediately when you're looking at that person, let's just say the 1%, let's call him Bad Brian. Let's just say that Bad Brian here is a 1%, and we're looking at Bad Brian and going, you know, we got to immediately move from the personal side of it to the process side of it. So immediately take it out and don't even look at Bad Brian as the issue, look at the process side of it. Because remember, the 1% will show up somewhere else or something down the road, but the majority of us, when they're bringing those issues, are good people. And remember, the 1% will take care of themselves. We ain't even got to spend no time, energy, or effort on them. So Bad Brian will trip himself up somewhere down the road. We don't have to worry about that with him. Let's look at the next page, which is our personal reinforcement. If you look at this, we kind of put together some, again, we're starting to bring together all these things that we've been talking about over these, or what we've talked about over these 30 hours of classes, and starting to bring them together to kind of group them. Let's look at the personal reinforcement, individual leadership. Now, we've also gone over this a couple of times. Let's look at the leadership. The leader, we're looking at, we're saying the individual leader, the work leader, and then the home leadership. So what we're again talking about is that one of these things, we can't separate the home life from the work life or from who we are as an individual. So if you look at it, we're really looking at 3 different things. And one is who we are as an individual, how we're acting or interacting. 2 is how it's affecting folks at the workplace, and how is it affecting our home life. Because we have to put that in there, because whether we realize it or not, it is. And remember, a lot of the frustration are due to the 4 barriers to quality. So if you look at it, leadership, we're talking about the base character. We have looked at that, the base character all the way across the board. And our base character, and we won't go down there to that yet, but the base character is the quality of people, the combination of emotional, intellectual, moral qualities. The quality person tends to keep their thoughts and their emotions to themselves and under control. And what we're saying here is that we do the best with what we have. When you're looking at that, I think it's unfair to say that person's not a quality, they're not this. If they're a good person, they're of quality. They might not have the awareness or the understanding or the tools out there, but they're of quality. They're doing the best that they can with what they have. And what we need to do is keep that stuff internally, the best that we can. Then we need somewhere to release that. Hopefully we have a spouse that we can talk to or a good friend So what we're looking at is to retain our integrity, keep that emotion under control. Then the individual leadership is concession. The concession is that we're not dug into anything. That what we are is that we're able to yield, we're able to listen, we're able to take advice, we're able to, when someone says necessarily like, my hair's always messed up or something, that I don't start crying in the corner because I got curly hair. But in the fact that we know we got to put some stuff on there to hold it down. So if you look at this, the concession, being able to give, and we're saying here the concession is to forgive and forget. We're looking at, as those issues are happening internally within the organization, we're looking at being able to forget and forgive and move on. And we're looking at especially at the home, we really want to look at the forgiveness, because we're living with those folks at home and we really need to be able to move past that. But remember, it's almost like a ritual or a rite that I've got to carry a grudge, that I've got to be the person unhappy. I've got to be and make sure everybody knows that I'm unhappy. So if you look at it, that's the concession. The commitment is that the commitment to what we're doing internally within the organization to ourselves and also to our fellow workers. And we're saying here the commitment, we're looking at the being humble, putting ourselves as almost in a point of service to others around us. And it says at home is serving others, is helping other people. Because when you help other people, whether you realize it or not, you're helping yourself. And by helping yourself, you're building your esteem and self-worth. But if you look at it, we talked the other day about that snob and the stuff. They never help nobody. They have absolutely no self-esteem. And that 1%, man, you couldn't make them happy if you gave them a bucket of ice cream. So if you're looking at this, the consistency is the next one. The consistency. I don't care what we do, what we agree on, what we tell our kids, what we tell our co-workers, but we have to do it and do it day in and day out. And because we talk with a lot of kids in college that are looking to get out in the workforce, and they're going like, well, what's the big deal? What is the secret to success? There's really no secret other than just hard work. Almost every entrepreneur out there that has built a business or an organization, it didn't happen overnight. And same with most of us. We're looking at the consistency is, we're saying, if you're going to get to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter. Do it every day. Don't do it sometimes and then sometimes not, because we call that time stuff, as years ago when I was in sales, it was kind of the life and death of a salesman, and that was their time. Either we had folks that utilized the time or they totally abused it and couldn't manage it. And so what we saw is that I'll come in 5 minutes late. Okay, I'll make it up tomorrow. Or I'll take the half day off and I'll come in early. And what you find is that they never make up the time. They're always justifying it. And so what happens, that starts setting a personal habit of inconsistency. Because whether you realize it or not, what you're doing there is also going into other parts of your life. So we're saying be consistent. We all have our bad days, but if you're consistently a good person, everybody around will know that you're having a bad day. And if you're under control and have that self-esteem and self-worth, what's going to happen? It's not going to be these extremes up and down. Now we're looking at over in the work leadership of work ethic. It was an interesting thing where I really discovered in athletics is that I went to college on a football, basketball, and baseball scholarship. And I was not really necessarily the best athlete. I just did that much more than everybody else. They'd say hit one time, I'd hit twice. They say do 5 line drills. I'd do 10. They would say go out there and take batting practice. I'd take it until we could no longer see. But it was not like we're doing, I really don't like that term, give it 120%, you can't give it. You only got 100%. I don't know who started selling that seminar a gazillion years ago, but just give the best that you can. And what we're saying is that what we've seen to be able to get by is that even at 70%, but consistently give that 70%. And then when we have to step up, that we've got an order coming in on top of another one, or we've got other issues that start hitting our fires, let's step up to that 100% and perform and get it done. But let's not get out there to all that stuff where they're saying we got to be this Superman or something. Then we're saying the work ethic and helping others at home and in our leadership and into the community. Trustful. We're saying as an individual, as a leadership, being trustful, that promotes the consistency, and you're having the trusting environment around you. Truthful, self-worth, and patience. Patience is really a big key here, is that the patience, the reason we have patience is because we have self-worth and we're truthful with ourselves. Motivating, positive reinforcement. And we're looking at not only at work but at home. Motivating the positive reinforcement at work, we positively have to reinforce one another, especially at home. And these are the tough things that we see in our organizations, is to be able to be consistent and put that thing into place and make it a part of how we're doing business. It's a full-time job, but we end up going to one seminar, then the next week we're not doing it again. We have to make that a part of the organization and how we're doing business. Monitoring, holding accountable. Do what you say you're going to do. And this is, I keep kind of going back to our kids, because this is really what a lot of these issues that we can all identify with, is that whatever time we're telling our kids or whatever we got to do, we just do what we say we're going to do. And we're going to hold it accountable, even at work. If we say that we're going to start locking the door at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and we don't get it done, we need to hold it accountable. And if we're telling our kids that they got to be home at 7 o'clock at night or before dark after school or something, we have to monitor that. We have to hold it accountable, because that promotes the consistency. And if you look at the maintenance of the thing, a lot of this reinforcement stuff is what we're looking at, the maintenance that really requires what we call self-control and patience. Again, is that the self-control is dealing with who we are, getting it under control, and not getting extreme in any one direction. Accountability. Accountability is, in effect, not necessarily that tough, but it's got to make tough decisions. And the only tough decisions at work or at home or in our life is holding accountable what we've agreed on. That's why we've said no matter what you're doing in the organization, make it to where you're sure that we can do it. If you're saying that, hey, everybody's got to be here at 8:05, how about 8:10? Because we want to make sure everybody can do it. Don't make the deal so tight that you know you're not going to be able to keep to your commitments. Because again, that starts setting a lot of other stuff in a negative manner. And then we're looking at the improvement. As we move down and we build this character, and we build this base character, the improvement, if you see the base character, because we have to continually grow as individuals. And the only way that we're going to be able to continually grow is with education and awareness through our experiences. And the majority of that needs to come from a structure, and about the only place most of us are going to be able to get it is at work. So this is where, and we'll talk later about this, about how the organizations are going to be evolving to what we term the universities of tomorrow. We're going to have a whole different look at this education and this awareness. And down at the next line, we're looking at the positive attitude reinforcement. We have to continually reinforce positive attitude. Now, you know, we all joke about it and we all do this and we all that. Well, we just got to stay on top of it. And that's why we're saying around all of us, if somebody's saying it or doing it, we all have to reinforce, like you'll say, I'll happen to be positive one day, somebody else will be negative the next, but between all of us, we'll be able to hold each other accountable. And remember, when we're showing with respect for one another, when we're going, hey, that's a negative rap, or what we call a code of conduct, we're not taking it personal. And remember, the 1%, no matter what you tell them, they're going to get angry anyway. And we're not concerned with that because that's at that point of extreme that's way out there. We're not even focusing on those guys, other than the fact we want you to be able to identify what, not only who they are, but what they're doing to you and to your organization, because that's an awareness point. Because so many of them have learned to manipulate us, now we're going to be able to identify them and hold them accountable. And we're giving you the tools to hold all that stuff accountable. Again, the base values are the 4 barriers to quality: the fear of expression or action, lack of communication, verbal, written, lack of written procedure, and lack of training. Again, look at everything we've talked about, how this applies to everything that we're discussing. And I challenge you to go back to work and not see if 98% of your problems aren't in there. And then the only thing that might not be in there would be fraud or 1%. But that's base values take care of that. Now let's look at, again, the base values and the 2 rules: do what's morally and ethically correct, treat everybody as you want to be treated, and of course the base character. Let's turn now to the next page, the story, Just Ask. This is the life lesson says it takes greater strength internally to accept help than to give it when asked. What do y'all think we mean by that? We're saying here that some of us have such issues that we're dealing with, we cannot ask for help, because the fact that we look at it as asking for help is a sign of weakness. And what we're looking at here is just ask, because I have found it a gazillion times that if you ask for help, there's people willing to help. People will do almost anything for you, and that's how sometimes some of us get taken advantage of. But if you look at it, if you need help, just ask. And it was kind of interesting in one of our companies, and I think I might have told this story earlier, but it really kind of, in fact, I think it's one that might have focused me on that thing. That story there is that I was in one of our plants and I was going to get a soda, and they were only a quarter or 15 cents or something. It's not that it was that long ago, it was the fact that we subsidized the sodas and stuff. But if you look at it, I was in there and I didn't have any money, and one of our frontline operators come up and I said, hey, man, the guy just did everything he could. He had a good pocket full of change. He bought me a soda, lit up a smile. We were able to smile. I thanked him, brought on some conversation. But you can see, I put myself in his shoes of how we feel good when we help somebody. See, now what we've got to do is bring that same feeling into here about feeling good about ourselves, that we're able to do that ourselves internally, make ourselves feel good without external. But if you look at it, that's a good way, and that's what we're talking about, the giving thing. So we're asking you to just step back and ask, and it takes greater strength to ask than to give. And need to really think on that one there. Okay, next, let's look at the funnel concept. The funnel concept, the life lesson is really kind of a long one here. It almost looks like it's another story that we wrote. It says the program has found that 99% of the employees in an organization are good employees. As the employees move through the program, we find that 5% of the employee base resist the program for a variety of reasons. Statistically, 4 to 5% get on board, and on the program usually between month 18 and 24, leaving 1% of the employee base. Again, statistically, 1% of the employees are bad, and they'll remove themselves from the program. So if you look at this is what we've been talking about, the funnel concept. It has a lot to do with the accountability. And what we're looking at, the accountability comes from what we've been talking about all these classes here of bringing and building the infrastructure. So if you look at this, the funnel concept, as we bring in and define our organization, the funnel concept, people start jumping in at different times. And that is, remember, we can affect up to 20% with one or two of the negative characteristics. So if you look at the 1% that affect 5, that affect 20, as the funnel concept, as time goes by and the consistency, all these things that we just talked about start creeping into the organization, people jump on at different times because they know now that it's going to be held accountable. And that now they've stopped listening to that 1% because it's now getting to where they're going to get in trouble. Up till the accountability, and being that they were thinking the company is for real, is that they've been sitting on the sidelines. They've kind of been participating in this negative rap. But if you really think about it, as they're jumping on, you're getting people now involved again in the organization. Let's look at the next page, negative influence. The 1% profile. Okay, let's just call that Bad Brian again. Let's look at the 1%. The 1% profile, we're saying here, this is what that thing looks like, the baseless character. We're saying the 1% thrives both at work and at home when things are done in an informal way. What we're looking at there is being informal, meaning things aren't defined, things aren't in order. And let's go down and let's look at some of these things. In business, and if you'll notice these are from somewhere else in our program. If you look at in business, it's status quo. When you have status quo in business and the 1%, I am not going to change. And it can be from the fact of fear, it can be from a gazillion other things in the 4 barriers, but the 1% in the workforce wants to keep it like it is. Why do they want to keep it like it is? Well, they want to do that because it's informal and they're able to manipulate everything. So they're the ones that start squealing the loudest when the accountability starts moving into the organization. And in our personal life, how does that 1% look? That 1% resist accountability. Now, what do we mean by resisting accountability? They never put themselves into a position to where they're accountable, meaning that you're asking me to, well, do you want to go out Friday night? Well, I don't know. Call me Friday afternoon. They're not going to commit Tuesday. And if you look at that, it's really kind of interesting because that's how it always kind of goes, is that they're not going to put themselves in a position of accountability. They're going to totally resist accountability. See, and this is what we're saying is we're defining the organizational structure of why they resist and squeal the loudest, because they start seeing it before anybody else comes. Because the ones that are over here on the side, they're like, oh, okay, they're trying to, okay, do we trust, is it? But the 1% are way ahead of us because remember, they're always manipulating the deal. And so what's going to happen? They see it coming before anybody else, and they're the first ones to tell you every reason in the world why we shouldn't be doing it. Next is the moving target. In business, the moving target, especially in an informal organization, is continually moving. And if you look at in your personal life, we're saying there's no commitment. If you'll look at that 1%, there's absolutely no commitment to nothing. The 1% has problems getting to work, they have problems at work, they have problems on the way to work, they have problems with the gas station when they pull over to get gas. It's like they're a magnet because they're getting out of life what they put into it. So if you look at from the personal side of it, there's absolutely no commitment. And I want you all to really step back and look at some of these folks that we've either had dates with, some of us have maybe even married some of them, or whatever, but we want you to look at this and think about these folks and these issues and these characteristics. Next is reaction. In the business, we're reacting. We're totally reacting because we're doing nothing constructive for the organization. So, in fact, when the 4 barriers are there, because remember, everything has to still be done with the remembrance of the 4 barriers to quality. So if you look at it, the reaction, and in our personal life, there's absolutely no discipline. There's none. And that is, there's no consistency. There's nothing they do the same every day. They'll either drink until they drop, or they'll won't keep a job. And you'll see here that it basically, they have no discipline, and they're totally reacting to everything. Example, they get behind on a payment on the car. They won't address the issue until they're ready to, somebody out there's got the tow truck jacking it up, ready to move it out. Now they're going to run out there with the check to try to get you to drop it. We're saying here there's absolutely no discipline internally, and they're always just about late for work or 3 minutes past. And if you look at firefighting, internally within the business, that 1% is totally firefighting. Because again, they're moving around in the organization, never getting anywhere close to any kind of discipline or commitment or accountability. So what's happening is that they're in that mode of firefighting. They go from one fire, and they're going to let you daily know that they're putting out the fire, everybody's dumped on them, and a lot of the stuff that's happening is because of who they are, and they're bringing it on. And in our personal life, they start problems. They always have problems, and they're always willing to share those problems with you. And if you look at that they'll have problems at the, like I'm just saying, like at the gas station. They'll go up and they'll say that guy was the rudest person in the world, or I pulled, no matter in their life, what happens, they always have problems or starting problems, or when they're ending a problem, they're jumping right back into another one. Demoralizing, one target to another. And what we're looking, or I'm sorry, one tragedy to another. And what we're saying there is that demoralizing, not only to themselves, but folks around them, is that it becomes, they move from one tragedy to the next. And if you'll look at it, it'll soon be replaced by another one. They'll always have some chaos going in their life. And the sad thing for a lot of us, we get into that loop trying to help these folks, and all they're doing is taking us down with them. And if you look at it, they're able to reach out and bring people down with them. And if you look at it, they'll not have any real close friends. They'll have a bunch of folks that they know that they kind of hang with. And then it says here, suspicious. In the business thing, they're always suspicious of everything because they have no trust, no respect, no dignity, and they can't even see why anyone else would have any. So really what they're doing is mirroring who and how they are. So they're very suspicious, and they doubt everything. No matter what that deal is, they doubt it. And that's one of the biggest things internally, especially when we start a program. They'll tell you every reason, I doubt if it'll, well, that thing won't work, this thing won't do. And remember, they're notorious for spreading that grief around. That's kind of what gives them their wins. And then again, the half-truths, lying, chaos, and what you'll look at, the life out of order. Even from the fact that their room's not straight, or their house is not straight, their car's a mess, is that if you look at it, they're out of order. Everything in their life is out of order. Won't take a stand. In the organization, man, they'll just keep moving whatever direction. In their personal life, they're sitting on the sidelines. They're sitting there telling you what the government should do. They're sitting there telling you what the schools can do. They're sitting telling you what the company could do. They're telling you what your family should do. But they're not doing anything. And they're really there to help make you feel awful. And then it says stand fast, my way or the highway. Do you ever wonder why you hear that or see someone? Because that's the only control they got. The only control they got is that if it's my way or the highway, and in that is that by you not agreeing or you trying to convince them to agree with you, that gives them their strength and their self-worth. So if you look at this, it's my way or the highway. And if you look at it, that's their thing, that's their patch they wear on their sleeve. Man, I got my own way of doing it. They don't want to do it. It's this or it's this. And next it is the management. And the other one is the personal life is a control super freak. I don't know if any of y'all ever heard that before, but if you look at it, we're saying a control freak. We're saying a control super freak. And that is that they try to control the stupidest things known to civilized man. I've actually seen it to where a cup is set on the counter. They want to move the cup 2 inches. Or if you want to get a drink of water, they want to fill the cup up halfway or full where it was only half. Or if you put something in the dish drain, they'll wash it and then put it back in the dish drain. And if you look at that, that's the same thing at work. We give them the work. They're either going to criticize it, say it needs to be redone, or they're going to try to fix it, or they're not. They're trying to put it in a position to where you have to get their approval. So if you look at it with the insecurities, this is again like kind of the my way or the highway attitude. Is what happens there is that the only way they get a win is by controlling these little bitty things that you and I go, man, yeah, have at it, cowboy, it don't matter to me. But what they do, they try to hold on and control the things that mean absolutely nothing, because that's the only strength or the win that they will get. And that's how they build themselves up, literally by tearing everybody else down. Okay, so that's kind of our little chart there with that negative influence. Now let's look at, again, as we talk about this, and we move through this, the 99%, and we've talked about the responsibility of accountability. What we can do, even if we don't have the structure in place, we want you to take this defined base work center worksheet and start listing stuff that you do. And what you're going to see is that if nothing else, you can work with your co-workers, you can work with the other managers and start listing these things that you do internally within the organization to start working on some of that accountability. But remember, you can't give accountability till you give responsibility. So what we have to do here is help define those systems, work on the 4 barriers, because remember, we're saying out here they want to be accountable. Next is that if you look at, that's at that order request generic log, what we're or scheduler. What we're saying there is that if you're having these problems with these issues and looking at accountability, list what these things are that you're agreeing to or what people are asking you, and go through the discipline to get when do you want it, when I have, and what's it look like, and get the deal points. And so what we're saying here is that you're going to have to get the discipline to write these things down. And in fact, that's going to start giving accountability. And one of the best mentors I had was Jim Sr. of Baker Commodities. That man had notebooks, he had pads from every company, every country, every person that he sat down with. When they started talking about what had happened, he'll go to his file cabinet and he'll have sets of books and pull it out, and he'll know exactly where the deal is at. And that's the same thing here, is that let's get it in agreement, let's write it down, and let's manage, plan, schedule, and monitor it. That'll in turn, in a very simple way, give you some tools to start bringing some accountability in an informal organization. Number 10, let's look at the action item, quick action. That's the other form. If again, from the accountability and the responsibility issue, remember, don't try to do it all, give it out. And this is a good form here to use that, to write down what you want and get an agreement and hold everybody accountable. And now we want to look at the frequently asked questions and thoughts. How does given responsibility promote accountability? If you look at it, how in the world can we be accountable when we don't give the responsibility? We're not saying just throw a deal at them. It has to give sincerely the responsibility of that particular issue, and what we're saying is that responsibility. We talked the other class about being what we call self-managed. If you look at being self-managed here, we're looking at giving that responsibility, and they will be accountable, but we have to give them the tools to succeed. What do you mean, don't shoot the messenger? Again, what we're saying here, we all ask for the bring us problems, do all this other stuff. What we're saying is just don't beat the stew out of somebody as they bringing you a problem. Is that immediately, when they're bringing you something, immediately step out of the looking at the person and move to the process. That should be your first question or first thought, other than looking at that person. We want you to go over to the side, okay, let's look at the process of that particular fire or that issue. Or we do it and we go, oh, well, we don't need to write it down or we don't need to define it. We move through it. What you're going to see, it's going to continually revolve. How does promoting prompt the quality of life? If you look at, we're saying here the quality of life really is talking about, I guess, when we're given the accountability and the responsibility, it is moving us because of who we are. We need to have responsibility. We need to have missions. We need to have a purpose. And what we're saying here with what we're talking about, and in effect, it promotes our quality of life. What do you mean by personal reinforcement? We personally have to reinforce each other and individually. I have to get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and give me some positive feedback and personally reinforce who I am, where I'm going, what we're going to do, and how I'm going to be there. And we don't need to make it all complex. Pick a few things to work on. But believe me, just take a little bit. If you remember this extremeness thing, we either going, it's like working out. I've seen it 1,000 times. I'm going to join the club. Now I'm working out 7 days a week, 4 hours a day. Well, you know how long that lasts. That lasts about a month. We're saying if you do nothing but work out once a month, just do it once a month, but do it day in and month out. Then it says, why is positive attitude important? What we're looking at here, positive attitude sets the tone for who you are and what you're going to be attracting. If you're negative, you're going to do nothing but move from one hardship to the next. What do you mean by just ask? Again, we're talking about just ask. Being able to set that ego aside, being able to kind of put yourself in a serving position and ask someone to give you a help. And whether it's at work or at home or in the community, but a humbling of oneself. And we're saying here by just asking builds more strength and more character. Now we're going, well, there's always some guy asking. We're not talking about the extreme and we're not talking about the 1% because we're focusing on the 99%. Describe the funnel concept. What we're saying here with the funnel concept is that as the organization goes through and promotes truth, that promotes trust, that promotes consistency, the funnel concept comes in, people start jumping on board and going with the company and the 1% will drop out. We'd like for you to step back from this and look at not only what we talked about here today, but also start looking at all these process and systems issues and base work center issues here. I want you to start tying this philosophy together with the process side of it. Because remember, we have to continually improve our people, our process, and our procedures, and continually work on our personalities and who we are for continuance and growth of the